Making a better world for you and for me. As from your noble portals, your sons and daughters go to face a world of challenges, to conquer every foe. We'll work and play together, and as time marches on, we'll never get the lesson done. Ebola, we are one. UWI, we praise you. We lift our voice in song. We let our big drums roll loud and steel pans spin ping pong. For you have shaped our lives so that we can truly say, to you we owe our gratitude, a debt we can't repay. There is a light that is rising from maps of the west, and brothers of that light are we. So we follow those whose work has brought glory to your name, making a better world for you and for me. This is our university of the West Indies.
You just heard the official song of the University of the West Indies. Today we are joined by an international audience, and so it is difficult for me to determine with what time of day I should greet you. So please accept my greeting for the time of day that is appropriate for you. It is a few minutes after 10 a.m. here in Jamaica. We are gathered today in cyberspace to celebrate a milestone, not only in Caribbean lexicography, but in the lexicography of the English language. 25 years ago, the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage, DCEU, made its transition from an idea that had been evolving and in progress for several decades to a treasure trove deftly contained between two covers decorated by the flags of the Caribbean territories whose English-related varieties it recorded. This event is a cooperation by the Jamaican Language Unit, the Richard and Jeannette Allsopp Center for Caribbean Lexicography located in Barbados, and the Helsinki Society for Historical Lexicography. I am Joseph Farquharson, coordinator of the Jamaican Language Unit. The Jamaican Language Unit is a research, teaching, and public advocacy entity located in the Department of Language, Linguistics, and Philosophy on the Mona campus of the University of the West Indies. Although I was familiar with the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage during my undergraduate years, a Grenadian possibly changed the trajectory of my life when in 2002, he gifted me a copy of the dictionary. Back then, I was Commonwealth Youth Ambassador for Jamaica and had gone to the Spice Island, Grenada, for a forum of youth ambassadors throughout the region. Little did I know that the DCEU was going to play such a central role in my academic formation. It was an essential source of data for my PhD thesis on the African lexis in Jamaican. As a young, precocious postgraduate student, I would quarrel with the DCEU for its weaknesses. As a battle-worn, almost defeated thesis writer, I marveled at its depth and breadth. And as an early career academic, I came to appreciate it for the richness of its treatment and the sheer magnitude of the work that produced it. Today, we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the publication of the DCEU with reflections from leading scholars such as Jeannette Allsopp, Ian Robertson, Lise, who will help us to reflect and appreciate the contribution of the dictionary. But first, we have to deal with some formal matters since Caribbean people are manners-able. So, the Caribbean has borrowed words from America such as crib for a baby's cot and apartment for what the British refer to as a flat. However, words are not the only items that we import from the US. One such non-lexical import into the Caribbean is Dr. Jason Siegel, who has been the director of the Richard and Jeannette Allsopp Center for Caribbean Lexicography since 2014. He has done work on English and on French-related and English-related Caribbean Creoles, and was the chief organizer of the 2017 DSNA conference in Barbados. I now invite Dr. Siegel to do the official welcome to the event.
Thank you, Dr. Farquharson. Dr. Jeannette Allsopp, founder and former director of the Richard and Jeannette Allsopp Center for Caribbean Lexicography, Professor Emerita Lise Weiner of McGill University, Professor Ian Robertson of the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, Professor Jukka Tyrkkö of the Helsinki, should I argue? Of HELEX, Dr. Joseph Farquharson, Director of the Jamaican Language Unit, esteemed colleagues and guests, welcome. I am very excited for today's event featuring three magnificent and prolific scholars of Caribbean language. When I arrived at UWI nearly 8 years ago, I came as a scholar of French Creoles with considerably less experience in and knowledge about English-related Creoles and the English official Caribbean. I urgently needed to go beyond familiarity and get to a measure of expertise on this part of the region and its languages. The work of Ian Robertson, Lise Weiner, and Jeannette Allsopp, as well as the dictionary that we are here to celebrate, were indispensable resources. Hardly a week goes by where I do not consult the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage or one of the dictionaries by Professor Weiner or Dr. Allsopp, who have also been personal mentors to me. Professor Robertson did me the great honor of setting a high bar for the first Richard Allsopp Memorial Lecture, which is our department and our center's major annual linguistics lecture. So a gathering of these three people makes me especially proud. Today's event follows several events of this year celebrating the 25th anniversary of the chef d'oeuvre of the namesakes of the Richard and Jeannette Allsopp Center for Caribbean Lexicography. Professor Hazel Simmons McDonald delivered the Richard Allsopp Memorial Lecture in January, and we also prepared a display for the Sydney Martin Library that we had hoped to present to you again in person in Jamaica this year, but which is in the final editing stages of a video version, long overdue. So keep an eye on Braadkyaas Jamiekan for it in the coming weeks. The first PhD recipient in the Caribbean lexicography track of the linguistics doctorate at Cave Hill, Dr. Hélène Zamor, joined Dr. Allsopp and me on a panel honoring the multilingual supplement portion of the DCEU in April. In May, Dr. Allsopp delivered a public lecture on the dictionary that gave a wonderful exegesis of not only the history, but also the format and effect of the DCEU. We hope to have a book launch for the school version that Dr. Allsopp has co-edited before the year is over, and we are excited for the 50th anniversary the 50th anniversary of lexicography at Cave Hill to be celebrated next academic year. The Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage remains one of the great academic achievements of the humanities in the Caribbean. Its breadth and depth reflect an inspirational vision that to this day has no real analog in other parts of the English official world. A comprehensive inventory of words old and, well, at least in 1996, new, it documents Caribbean English and Caribbean culture in a way that gives pride to any Caribbean reader, enlightening them to marginal or unusual usages that they had not encountered before, demonstrating the cross-island and cross-cultural connections, and instructing them about the social acceptability of many different variants of the same word. On behalf of the Richard and Jeannette Allsopp Center for Caribbean Lexicography, I proudly welcome you all to what will surely be a compelling and thorough discussion of this landmark publication. Welcome to the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage, 25 years on. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Siegel, for your warm welcome and getting us started on the right foot. Dr. Jukka Tyrkkö is professor in the Department of Languages at the University of Linnaeus, located in Sweden. He currently serves as the president of the Helsinki Society for Historical Lexicography, and he's author or co-author of dozens of papers and co-editor of some 7 edited volumes, which leads me to think that Swedes don't sleep. He will bring us greetings from the Helsinki Society for Historical Lexicography.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Farquharson, and everyone involved in organizing this event, and for generously extending an invitation to members of the Helsinki Society for Historical Lexicography to attend this exciting event. The reason behind the invitation is, of course, that Joseph is not only a highly valued member of the Society's board, but also the organizer of the forthcoming 7th HELEX conference, the conference series that Jason already referred to, which I'll say a couple of words about in a minute. Before that, however, I would like to begin in my capacity as the chairperson of the Society by congratulating the compilers of the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage for reaching this wonderful milestone and for organizing such an exciting anniversary event. Everyone familiar with lexicography in any capacity can appreciate the remarkable amount of work and thought that goes into compiling a dictionary. And it is a great opportunity for us to get the opportunity to learn from such important and notable scholars at this event as well. We are, of course, not gathered here to talk about the Society, so I will keep this very brief. The Helsinki Society for Historical Lexicography is an international academic society that was formed some 7 years ago following the success of the HELEX series of conferences, which a group of us started back in Helsinki in 2005, and hence the name Helsinki Society. Back then, a number of us were working at the same research unit at the University of Helsinki, and the idea was put forward by my friend and colleague, Dr. Rod McConkie, that we would organize a conference on historical lexicography and lexicology. This we did, and it was such a success that we ended up organizing another 2 conferences in 2008 and 2012. After those 3 conferences, the conference series had grown wings of its own, so to speak, and the subsequent 3 conferences were organized at Oxford, Zurich, and Lake Garda. The 7th conference was supposed to have been organized already in Jamaica last year, but unfortunately, due to COVID, the event has been postponed to 2023. And I myself and many members of the Society are very much looking forward to coming to Jamaica for the conference, and we certainly hope to meet many of you in person at that conference. The Society was formed to manage the conference series and to advance the research on historical lexicography. However, despite its name, which reflects the city in which the Society was founded, it is an international society with a wide reach, and we welcome members interested in historical lexicography in any capacity from all across the globe. We also organize online seminars several times a year, which we stream on Zoom and record. And we hope that many of the viewers of this current event would also consider joining our Society. For now, however, it just remains for me to thank you all once again for the opportunity to say a few words and to wish everyone a fantastic event today. And I'm very much looking forward to listening and taking notes and learning from all the great scholars gathered here today. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Jukka.
Wanna talk like a yard man, know where to turn. I put it in a song, I'ma teach the whole world. So just open your ears, yo, listen and learn. Wagwan mean what's going on. Build on my youth mean relax and stay calm. If you crying real loud, that mean you a ball. Little more mean later, yeah. And if your bad mind, you's a hater. And if you love chat, that mean you's a traitor. Yo, man, I really hard, man. That mean I'm from Jamaica, and we no ramp with people. That mean we don't play. If you don't like girls, then you're gone the wrong way. Then you have to run wet, means you gotta run away. Take a life, you just make a duppy. Cut it mean cut it, break it mean rock it, dirty mean dirty. A dog is a gun, not an animal. Police is called Babylon, yeah. I know you like the way that I'm dropping it. Real part one, I will never stop chatting it, chatting it, chatting it, chatting it. chatting. Real part one, I will never stop chatting, 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 chatting. Real part one, I will never stop. Fling mean throw, mean no, yeah, mean yes. Keep listening, cause I'ma tell you the rest. Move from your ass up, that mean get the hell out of here. Come here, that mean you should come here. Me no business, that mean I don't care. If you a done spot, that mean you can't read. And if your girlfriend is pregnant, that means she a breed. If the baby ain't yours, then the child is a jacket. Get the hell out the way, that mean you should watch it. A gun with a clip is a matic, but I'm talking about a knife when I say I got my ratchet. Slick mean good, mad mean good, bad mean good. I live in the garrison, that mean I'm from the hood. Like the way that I'm dropping it. Real part one, I will never stop chatting, 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 chatting. Real part one, I will never stop chatting, 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 chatting. Real part one, I will never stop. Lock off, no man, that means shut the hell up. You ain't got no money, that mean that you broke. If you salt, then you got bad luck. Your pants is your trousers, your shirt is your shut. A crackhead is a stocky, close it mean lock it. Stop it mean top it, come give me a link. That mean come and see me. If you follow fashion, that mean you wanna be me. Don't watch me, that mean don't pre me. Word mean what? Bird mean bud. A bad man is a gangster or a thug. Condom is called boots. Your child is your youth. Your friend is your dupes. Me can do that. That mean I can do it. You don't know what I want. That mean there's a whole lot to it. I know you like the way that I'm dropping it. Real part one, I will never stop chatting, 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 chatting. Real part one, I will never stop chatting, 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 chatting. Real part one, I will never stop chatting, 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 chatting. Real part one, I will never stop chatting, 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 chatting. Real part one, I will never stop chatting, 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 chatting.
Okay, welcome. This is how we do it in the Caribbean. And you can ask people like Lise and Ian about SCL conferences, where, you know, when it comes time, you can't tell if you're at a party or you're at a conference. So that was Craig Lure with Jamaican slang, and Craig Lure is an artist that hails from my hometown, Montego Bay, and the song celebrates one of those varieties that Caribbean linguists and linguists from outside the Caribbean have been engaged in studying for many decades. And of course, because it focuses on the vocabulary of one of those languages, in this case, Jamaican Creole. And I think both Jeannette and Lise could tell you how useful songs have been to Caribbean lexicographers, because we do not always have written texts as evidence for language, but our musicians have been invaluable sources for us. So our first presenter is Dr. Jeannette Allsopp. The name Jeannette Allsopp is well known in Caribbean lexicography, as she has written much on dictionaries and lexicographic topics over the past 2 decades. As research associate, she played a crucial role in the compilation of the DCEU and is responsible for the French and Spanish supplement at the back of the dictionary. At the Cave Hill campus of UWI, she was establisher of the Center for Caribbean Lexicography, later renamed the Richard and Jeannette Allsopp Center for Caribbean Lexicography, a unit for which she served as its first director. She's a compiler of the trailblazing Caribbean multilingual dictionary of flora, fauna, and foods, published in 2003, and in collaboration with the late Dr. Wendy Griffith Watson, she has prepared a school edition of the DCEU, which is soon to appear. Past president of the Society for Caribbean Linguistics and consultant to the Oxford English Dictionary, Dr. Allsopp was also instrumental in the preparation of the new Register of Caribbean English Usage, a 77-page supplement to the DCEU. She retired from the University of the West Indies almost a decade ago, but has not retired from lexicography. I welcome her to tell us about the conception and crafting of the DCEU.
Good morning, everyone, colleagues. First of all, thank you very much to both Joseph for organizing this discussion and Jason for his part in it and his introductory remarks. It is good to see Lise and Ian, my colleagues, fellow presidents of the past presidents of the Society for Caribbean Linguistics, and also to meet our new colleague from Helsinki, whom I had not had the pleasure of meeting before. So good morning to you all. I hope that you will benefit from this presentation that I'm going to do. I didn't have the time to time it because I had been somewhat out of commission for a while, having had an accident in my home and broken my arm. So I've just recovered from that, and I have tried to do the best I could. So I hope that you will enjoy my presentation, which is entitled under the theme of the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage 25 Years On, which was actually the title of my public lecture on May the 25th here in Barbados. And out of this, I decided to talk about the conception and crafting of the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage. So we now begin. There's a picture of my late husband, Richard Allsopp, who I'm sure is with us in spirit. And I will start the discussion by looking very quickly at early works in Caribbean English lexicography, which more or less set the scene for the later works and led up to the what is the peak of regional lexicography, which is the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage. So from the early 20th century, throughout the 20th century, there are a number of people, Van Sertima in what was British Guyana, Cruikshank, same country, Collymore in Barbados, C.W. Francis in Grenada, and C.R. Otley in Trinidad and Tobago, followed by Seaman with his Virgin Islands Dictionary, George Makisi, the Belizean Lingo, Janssen, Guyana again, Random Remarks on Creolese, A.J. Seymour, also Guyana, Dictionary of Guyanese Folklore, and John Mendes, Cote Si Cote La of Trinidad and Tobago, of course, preceding Lise's huge work on the English Creole of Trinidad and Tobago. And I just give you a quick glance at a couple of the book covers. What a Pistartle is vowels in the Virgin Islands, and Barbadian dialect is Collymore. Now, out of these things, and as time developed, there was a consciousness, a rise in consciousness that perhaps people could look at the English of their own territories, and that is how we got the rise of Caribbean territorial English dictionaries. But I'm not going to dwell too much on this because I know that Lise will be talking about this later on. But the two main works I can recommend you to have a look at, those who don't know them: the Dictionary of Jamaican English by Cassidy and LePage in 2 editions, and the Dictionary of Bahamian English by Home and Schilling. So both the DJE and the DBE are designed on historical principles. And that term means that the methodology used by both works was based on that of the Oxford English Dictionary, where all variant spellings of the items, all citations reflecting the usage of the word, and wherever necessary, all etymologies are dated. The DJE includes a complete inventory of Jamaican Creole, as well as a record of a more educated Jamaican English variety. Then the Dictionary of Bahamian English is the first comprehensive study of colloquial Bahamian English, forming a link between the Caribbean Creoles, such as Jamaican English, and the English spoken today by many Black people in the United States, which is a quote taken from Home and Schilling. Meant to represent the English spoken in the Bahama Islands, only 30 of which are inhabited, the authors faced the challenge of limiting themselves to selecting from the accessible islands only those which could be considered to represent the whole. So there were moves then towards regional Caribbean lexicography. And as that happened, you could see a development of linguistic and cultural awareness through the chronicling of local varieties, movement away from the cultural insecurity that characterized the attitudes to local language and culture in post-colonial societies. And that is one of the key characteristics of our societies, that we have been culturally insecure because our societies were colonial societies and were settled by the Europeans. So that was one of the things that Richard Allsopp definitely was concerned about. So I go on to say that such moves reflected in the rudimentary works of Makisi in his work, The Belizean Lingo and Vowels, What a Pistartle, dealing with Virgin Islands English, as well as the publication of the two scholarly territorial dictionaries, the DJE and the DBE, illustrated the fact that the region now needed a regional reference work. So I go on now to look at the conception and birth of the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage. The DCEU originated in the late 1940s as an idea in the mind of Richard Allsopp because of two life-changing and, for him, somewhat humbling experiences when he was a student at University College London. As an undergraduate student of French, this is the first experience, attending summer school in France, he was asked to translate into English the French phrase, "For it has stopped raining." His English version was, "The rain has held up," for which he was soundly reprimanded by his tutor. And I think what stung him a little bit more was that when his English fellow students heard about the English, they agreed wholeheartedly with his French tutor. So the second major factor in the conception is that on his return to British Guyana in 1948, he found, as a teacher of French, because he started as a teacher of French, that some of his French students translated the word for a stone, une pierre, as a brick. He then realized that his English, quote unquote, or Caribbean English as a whole, was not quite the same as British Standard English, and that he ought to do something to show the difference between British Standard English and Caribbean Standard English. Now, the initial motivation for the DCEU was primarily educational because he was teaching at his alma mater in Guyana, Queen's College at the time. As a French teacher whose students would be writing British examinations for the Oxford and Cambridge Examinations Board, Allsopp began collecting in an exercise book the words, phrases, and idioms that he knew would not be acceptable as English to a British examining board. However, his collection went further than the work of his students as he became more fascinated with what he was discovering. And he went into the community, gathering all types of material through personal encounters, surreptitious recordings, which of course would be politically incorrect today, and journalistic literature. His original intention was to produce a glossary of Guyanese words and phrases, but his departure from Guyana to join the staff of the UWI Cave Hill campus here in Barbados led him to a wider vision. Here, he could draw on much greater and more varied lexical resources because there were students on the campus from a wide range of English-speaking Caribbean territories. So the final deciding factors that led to the conception of the DCEU were the fact that the Ford Foundation gave a grant to a Caribbean language research program to be carried out on the 3 campuses of the UWI, which initiated the formation of what was originally the Caribbean Lexicography Project, which is now, of course, the Richard and Jeannette Center for Caribbean Lexicography at the Cave Hill campus to produce a regional dictionary of Caribbean English usage. Added to that, a resolution passed by the Association of Caribbean Headmasters and Headmistresses in 1967 led him to cross-reference his Caribbean examples with his Guyanese items because they were asking that the university should compile a list of Caribbean items so that they would be able to pass them on to the teachers, and the teachers would know how to deal with them, would know what was their own indigenous items, and be able to distinguish them from standard English items. So the crafting of the dictionary now, after the conception was complete, the challenge that Richard Allsopp now faced was how to compile and set out the DCEU. His original desire that it be a dictionary on historical principles, as I explained previously, could not now be accommodated, as the content of the planned dictionary embraced 22 English-speaking Caribbean territories. Allsopp himself says about the nature of the work, the immediate work, quote unquote, priority is, therefore, not a chronicle of our linguistic past, but a careful account of what is current, at least as an available basis for intra-regional intelligence. Therefore, a descriptive work is clearly indicated. That is one that reliably itemizes the environmental data and details the current lifestyle of the English-speaking Caribbean, yet not so without important qualification. Continuing in this vein, Allsopp observes, words and expressions like bound place, be behind somebody like a straight slave driver, that are in the gray area of currency in Caribbean English, serve to remind us that even at the surface of today's communication, the historical dimension is still with us. In dealing with these features, a chronicling, he says, of some of the partnership between historical, social, and linguistic developments from the 17th century to the present is involved in the work. So basically, the DCEU was designed as a linguistic and cultural educational tool to teach Caribbean people why their language is the way that it is, and to enable them to look with pride on their linguistic and cultural roots. Oh, sources now of the DCEU. The sources of the DCEU are all entirely Caribbean and consist of the following: 38 data collection workshops in 22 territories from Guyana to Belize, and these workshops were usually with teachers. Transcriptions of tape-recorded spontaneous speech, along with field notes from all the territories. An idiom checklist consisting of 300 items, one per box, because he had arranged it like that, so that the informant could supply full information, read frequency of use, whether the item was rural or urban in location, and the social status of each idiom. The checklists were answered by both participants in the workshop and sent to others via correspondence. Then there were individual responses to 32 categories of Caribbean lifestyle, such as children's games, beliefs, superstitions, architecture, etc. Responses to pictorial questionnaires, which included photographs and postcards of items in a number of areas, such as industry, domestic life, folk life, ornamental, flora, etc. These questionnaires were also used at the workshops and on field trips. Excerpts from all types of Caribbean literature, such as novels and short stories, journals and pamphlets, handbooks and travel guides, newspapers, magazines, UWI Caribbean study papers, etc. And the system of coding that he used guaranteed acknowledgement of every citation used from any source. Then there were specially commissioned vocabulary collections of Caribbean industries, such as the Guyana rice, sugar, and bauxite industries, the Trinidad cocoa industry, loanwords from the Indic cultures in Trinidad and Guyana, loanwords from the French Creoles of St. Lucia, Dominica, Grenada, which are used as part of the English of those territories, loanwords in Spanish used in those territories where there were significant Spanish occupations, such as Belize and Trinidad, and of course loanwords in Dutch, which we would find more in Guyana, such as telling and polder. Requests sent out to various government departments, such as agriculture, fisheries, forestry colleagues at UWI and the University of Guyana, seeking authentication of a specific item, such as the scientific names of plants, animals, official names, national honors, etc. So the purely, what's happening?
Let me just. We'll be back.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're just sorting out a technical glitch, and we will be back to Dr. Allsopp's presentation in short order. I just wanted to inform you that this event is being sponsored by the University of the West Indies Press. So the University of the West Indies Press gained the copyright for the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage and has been producing an edition, a paperback edition of the dictionary. And that has been around for quite a while now. And you will have an opportunity to gain copies of the dictionary generously donated by the University of the West Indies Press. The first question I'm going to ask, based on Dr. Allsopp's presentation, is going to be for undergraduate students. So if you're an undergraduate student of any university, you will get the chance to get a copy of the DCEU. So please ensure that you pay attention. Dr. Allsopp?
Yes, I apologize, but we had some technical difficulties. And you know, when the technology works fine, it's fine, but when it acts up, it causes problems. So my sincerest apologies to you. Now, the purely Caribbean content of the entries in the DCEU, whether they're individual items, idiomatic phrases, proverbs, or abbreviations, requires specific territorial identification so that each head word or phrase in the dictionary is territorially labeled. And I've sketched out the main characteristics of each entry, which are the head word, which is always in boldface and usually syllabicated. The head word can have variant spellings or related forms as well as sense numbers if the word has more than one meaning, or superscript numbers indicating different word classes or syntactic functions. The word class or syntactic function. The pitch pattern I will spend a little time on because it indicates the musicality of Caribbean English, indicating both the pitch or tune in which the item is pronounced, as well as the stress, so that the 1-2 sort of low-high intonation that is often heard in Caribbean language, English, is usually found between forward slashes where necessary. Pronunciation represented by the IPA alphabet, the word class or part of speech written in italics, allonyms, or other names, and this refers to the cross-referencing function of the dictionary, territorially labeled to represent the different names for one item across the Caribbean. And these are preceded by upright double slashes. The territorial label, usually written in 4-letter codes, for example, within parentheses, like JMCA for Jamaica. The status label, and this refers to the level of acceptability of the item. And he set out a system of levels of formality: formal, informal, anti-formal, erroneous, and with several subcategories under the anti-formal level. So these subcategories of under anti-formal, such as Creole, jocular, derogatory, and vulgar, determine the level of acceptability of a particular item, and of course indicate the prescriptive aspect of the DCEU. And of course, one item can combine two levels. So then is followed the definition, the scientific name of the item, if it's one of flora or fauna, the citation and citation source, the etymology in square brackets, the usage note preceded by a small square, and phrases. And I must point out at this stage that no one item usually has every characteristic cited as part of the content of the entry. I've shown a sample entry which has many of the attributes, the head word, the pitch pattern, the part of speech, a sense, numbers, allonyms, territorial labels, the definition, the scientific name, the etymology, and the second sense, where bell apple is the one more often used than golden apple. Now, the item has an asterisk next to it to indicate that it is one of the items listed in the English, French, Spanish supplement to the DCEU that I prepared, which consists of a selected list of flora and fauna from the main dictionary and their equivalents in French and Spanish. Now, coming to the end, 25 years, what is the impact of the DCEU after 25 years? 25 years after its publication, the DCEU is still very much relevant and is consulted by members of the public who are aware of its existence, because believe it or not, there are quite a few who are not, by linguistic and cultural researchers, botanists, herbalists, teachers, legal professionals, etc. It remains a vital source of information and instruction at several levels: phonological, grammatical, descriptive, encyclopedic, historical, agricultural, musical, religious, and so on. The new Register of Caribbean English Usage, NRCU, completed by Richard Allsopp before his death in 2009, is an offshoot of the DCEU, in which he added about 700 more items of Caribbean English vocabulary. And to conclude, his book of Afro-Caribbean Proverbs, completed in 2007, is a publication that gives full attention to the rich collection of Caribbean English proverbs and provides standard English translation of the proverbs, which are all written in Creole or dialect. As both Jason and I think Joseph pointed out, the DCU now has a school edition, which is currently in press at UV Press, produced by myself in collaboration with the late Wendy Griffith Watson, which will be illustrated and aimed at the secondary school students population from 11 to 18, providing language teaching tips for teachers of English. The DCEU has also generated, as was said before, the first and only Caribbean multilingual dictionary of flora, fauna, foods, compiled by myself, and there's a second volume that I've just about completed of religion, folklore, and festivals, which I hope will appear shortly. And so I can say that the DCEU remains a vital cultural agent within the Caribbean region. And although it is completely relevant still, it does need to be updated and distributed throughout the region. Such a task is not easily undertaken and requires positive regional support for the continuation of the work, support that should be both cultural and financial, so that the inventory of Caribbean life, language, life, and culture can be preserved as a vital marker of our Caribbean identity. So we hope that the DCEU will continue and that in the future we can have the updates that we need. So that is my presentation, and I thank you for listening.
Okay, so thanks very much, Dr. Allsopp, for that trip down memory lane, reminding us of the history of the work we are celebrating today. And so I did tell you that we had some giveaways. So remember, this question is specifically for undergraduate students. So if you're an undergraduate student of any university at all, Dr. Allsopp spoke about a dictionary of Bahamian English. Could you state one of the editors of that dictionary and the year in which it was published? So the first undergraduate student who types that into the YouTube chat will get the prize. Once I have noted your response, if it's the correct response, so that's the year of the publication and the one of the editors of that dictionary. So once I've noted it, I will send you an email address where you can contact us to claim your prize. So, although some people might consider dictionaries to be works of art, for many, they remain very academic pursuits. We will now take a break from the academic perspective and enjoy true art. Cyndi Celeste is a spoken word poet, writer, and creative entrepreneur based in Barbados. She's an arts activist and language advocate who uses literature and performance to encourage social discourse on issues of identity. Both on the page and on the stage, Cyndi's work contextualizes what it is to be young, Black, and progressive in the Caribbean, often exploring themes of racism, gender, language, and cultural identity. She's a graduate of the University of the West Indies, a graduate of the linguistics program at Cave Hill, in fact. And she has received several accolades, including a National Independence Festival of Creative Arts Bronze Award in Writing and Performance, second place in the inaugural Black British Writers International Poetry Competition, and a world ranking of 21 in the Women of the World Poetry Slam. That was held this year. She has coordinated several community outreach projects, including youth open mic nights, developmental workshops in schools, and community writing workshops. She has also released an album of her work entitled Syndicated, and that's syndicated spelled C-Y-N-D-I-C-A-T-E-D. And her writing has been published in volume 35 of the Caribbean Writer Literary Journal.
To the person who asks me to say something in Caribbean, I need a second to answer. As a matter of fact, give me 5. It's been a millennium since I've known what my native tongue sounds like. How am I supposed to speak a language you stole from me? Or you really just want me to unpick my teeth so you can hear how much, even after all this time, I still don't sound enough like you? 4. Google Translate ain't gonna help you here. When you try to replicate an island accent and think that this Bajan girl sound anything like that Jamaican misappropriation you got running around in Hollywood, it reminds me how often you look at me and see commodity before humanity, how often you look at my country and think you can make souvenirs out of my tongue. 3. My uncle moved to America when he was 13. By the time he turned 15, he'd forgotten how to say his own name. The Caribbean is made of nearly 30 countries, but you only take the time to taste one ingredient in this melting pot. It is no wonder my uncle cannot say he is Bajan without the spices slicing holes in his taste buds. 2. You don't want to understand me. Only to make museums out of the mausoleums in my mouth, my teeth, my tongue, my English. You like to put the things you consider broken on display for your amusement, but every exhibit you got is at the expense of my culture. 1. My navel string bury everywhere, which is to say that any place I brave enough to open my mouth and talk the same way as the people I come from do, regardless of whatever it is you think you entitled to. 1. Hey, home.
Okay, so that was Cyndi Celeste. Cyndi says she wrote this piece because of the way Caribbean languages seemingly only appreciated through tokenization in Western culture. There's a way, she says, in which media portrays Caribbean language varieties and are quick to reduce them to caricatures of themselves. And that fact frustrated her. This piece was also a response to lived experiences of feeling put on display when asked to say something in Barbadian. However, she never felt as though she was being asked out of genuine appreciation. In essence, the poem is how she navigates those feelings and goes through the process of deconstructing the internalized shame around her nation language. So thanks to Cyndi, and please remember to go look for her work, Syndicated. That's syndicated, spelled C-Y-N-D-I-C-A-T-E-D. So next up is Professor Ian Robertson. Professor Robertson insists that he's retired from the University of the West Indies. I have seen very little evidence of this because he has continued to engage in various capacities such as supervisor, examiner, counselor, mentor, just to name a few. A past president of the Society for Caribbean Linguistics, I dare say that Professor Robertson is to Berbice Dutch Creole what Christopher Columbus is to the so-called New World, but with less devastating effects. His first significant work on Berbice Dutch Creole was his 1979 thesis entitled Berbice Dutch, A Description. Prof. Robertson taught at the University of Guyana before accepting a post at the St. Augustine campus of the University of the West Indies, where he went on to serve as the head of the School of Education and later as Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Education. He's author or co-author of numerous articles and book chapters and co-editor of several edited books. He has a passion for the role of language in education, which has placed him in constant dialogue with teachers and ministries of education in the region, as well as the Caribbean Examinations Council. This is why he's the ideal person to talk to us about Caribbean education and schooling. The DCEU speaks. So while he is setting up to talk to us, I just remind you, I haven't seen the response yet. I'm getting Francis, I think I got Collymore, Chantal Jordan. All right, I see Rochelle. Rochelle said John Home, but we asked Rochelle, hold on, Home was an editor, published in the near. Okay, so that would be Rochelle first. I'm seeing too that, who is this? Chantal Jordan also said Home and Schilling, 1982. Yes, you're both correct. So that's the Dictionary of Bahamian English, compiled by John Home and Natalie Schilling, and that was in 1982. And so the prize would go to Rochelle Young. I'll put the email in the chat soon, Natalie. Prof. Robertson, are you ready for us? All right, you're still muted. So that's bottom left of, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're good now.
The only problem is that I have, anyway, it doesn't matter too much. You don't have to see me to hear me because I'm no longer on the Zoom link. But you can hear me.
Yes, we can see you too.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to start. I'm probably going to read much of this, Joseph, because I'm taking your 10-minute limit seriously, and I was trying to get everything down in there. No, I'm not very good at reading stuff of this kind, so I apologize in advance. And thank you very much for having me involved in this, because you have me here stuck between I mentioned to you that I feel like the thorn between the two roses. But I'm starting with the assumption that I have an advantage. And that is that I hold the distinction of being the only one of the three presenters today who has experienced direct education and leadership of the editor of the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage, Stanley Reginald Richard Allsopp. He was my first form master and French teacher in my first year at secondary school at Queen's College in Guyana, historically one of the leading secondary schools in the Caribbean region. And he was also my last form teacher in sixth form at the same institution. So I feel I can testify to his excellence as an educator and lexicographer, even though my own claim to anything to do specifically with lexicography is tightly linked to a short word list of about 30 items that I discovered in Berbice Dutch. I discovered crumpled in a letter in the archives in The Hague some 30, 40 years ago. So lexicography is not really my forte, but I do have a sense of education with which I like to operate. But I think that this experience with Allsopp as educator must have been the most powerful motivating force to the work we've done in lexicography. I think the work is motivated by a commitment to education in the best sense of the word. That is, as I would argue, education that sponsors the maximal inclusivity of all available resources and knowledge for advancing personal, national, and regional development. The most fundamental premise of such education is that we should proceed from what is known to what is unknown. For this reason, the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage challenges the misunderstanding of the truth that education equated with formal schooling holds the key to success. The misconception is one of the underlying assumptions of formal education systems throughout the Caribbean. In the case of Guyana, in the case of Trinidad, in one of the early policy statements in the in the mid-60s to the mid-80s, that policy statement, which I've just put up on screen, and I hope you can see it, says, full national independence and identity will be achieved and secured only on the basis of an education system which does not rely on foreign assumptions and references for its existence and growth. The educational revolution, and I underline this in bold, which is required, is a thorough one, not merely the substitution of a local examination for a foreign one, nor the substitution of tropical agriculture, locally produced books, and such things in place of foreign equivalents. Every component of the system would require to have, as the foundation of its validity, it's relevant to the needs of the people it serves. Now, although this recognizes the need for fundamental change, it is not actualized in the school system and certainly not normally implemented. In Trinidad, in the case of Barbados, a parallel statement points to the stated goal of the ministry was to produce an instrument of social change by providing the kind of educational experience which will contribute to the development of the people of Barbados in the following ways: economic, and on the economic, development of the ability to provide for one's family, and to contribute to the economic strength of the region. And secondly, the development of skills necessary for economic growth at the national level. In Dominica, the claim is that education should produce the skills necessary to meet the manpower needs of the society. Back to Trinidad. The child on completion of the primary cycle of education should recognize and understand the nature of our cosmopolitan population with its diverse cultural traditions and identify the historical and contemporary processes which contribute to the formation of society. Again, this is slightly more structured and clear than the earlier recommendations, but it still bears the mark of being restricted to a particular territory. In the case of Guyana, it is the feeling that as a result of a pupil's schooling, they should display special knowledge and skills, awareness, and behaviors. For example, speaking, listening to, reading, and writing languages used by Guyanese on formal and informal occasions, as well as other languages used by other peoples of neighboring countries with whom these Guyanese are likely to come into contact. Our perusal of these documents set out by these regional ministries points to two critical flaws. One, the conflation of education and schooling. And two, the overriding parochialism, which seems to compromise the effectiveness of schooling itself. Bearing in mind that the total population of the region is 6 million at maximum, and only 2 countries have more than 1 million, and most of them have populations of below 250,000, this is a difficult kind of assumption to operate with and to work with. The dictionary confronts both these assumptions. While it is true that education holds the key to success, it is also true that it is not to be equated with formal schooling. Formal schooling is restricted, focused on individual and self, parochial, top-down, and presents barriers to genuine growth. It is a misleading measure of ability, potential, and competence. It is often led to confining development and restricting potential to those who have had the opportunity to attend the formal schooling. And it tends to be selective. As a consequence, it is discriminatory. In particular, schooling at the primary and secondary levels are premised mainly on the assumptions and considerations carried over from the colonial experiences. Such systems pay little or no attention to the knowledge, behaviors, customs, and practices on which the majority of the societies have operated throughout the period of their formal education. Students entering the systems are treated as being bare vessels, empty individuals, on which learning and teaching are to be effected. There is the consequent undervaluing of the lived experiences of the societies, with its attendant eroding of self-confidence and self-awareness. Formal schooling, in my view, has led both those who benefit from it and those who have been excluded by it to accept it as a true measure of education and self-worth. I like to compare formal schooling in the region to learning to speed read. Speed reading compares reading practices with driving. It points out that when driving a vehicle, the driver focuses on the entire environment so that there is a conscious attention to all that is in the environment, and the actions taken are impacted by observations of all that could impact safe driving. In normal reading, by contrast, persons tend to focus inward and only on what is immediately on the line or even that part of the line on which one is focused. Speed reading encourages the reader to see the larger sections, even the entire page at a time. Caribbean education needs to adopt these basic principles for maximal inclusivity. The school of life, by contrast with the formal schooling system in the region, is much more facilitating of human variety and holds more potential for the development of individual, nation, and region. It is therefore instructive to focus on the critical dimensions of the DCEU and its potential to address individual, national, regional shortcomings in the formal school system. Allsopp, in a republication of some of the early writings to which Jeannette referred in the early 21st century, the republication is in the early 20th century, but these things were published between 48 and 53 in Guyana, in Kaikoverall. But in the introduction, he comments that he sought to focus on two things that I have on the screen now: the systematized spelling, which he formulated, and to avoid, as a way of avoiding conjecture or misunderstanding. This is important because it addresses the tendency to opine without any basis in fact. So very often we have people who offer learned positions on things that they know little or nothing about, or certainly they couldn't establish them as fact. And secondly, he said that these essays, therefore, offer the general reader an insight into the character of one of many cousins in a family of Caribbean Creoles, which any interested Caribbean person could interact with, and upon which I hope the more involved student could usefully build. And I think the second one is particularly important because it accepts the reality that these are small island states with too much in common to dare to go in separate ways. And the dictionary is, to my mind, critical for this. Now, I looked then at the dictionary itself, and in the introduction, he makes a number of points, and these really are, I'm mentioning these so that they can become a source for some discussion if we want. He's designed the dictionary, one, as a complete inventory, as complete an inventory as practicable of the Caribbean environment and lifestyle, as known and spoken in each territory, but not recorded in the standard British and American dictionaries. I think this is an important attempt to define Caribbean self, because what he's doing is he's saying there is something about us as a group which needs to be codified, it needs to be clarified, and which needs to be set up in a manner that it then focuses on our sameness rather than in our differences, while at the same time responding in a way to the more generally accepted authorities on issues of language at the normal educated level. The cross-referencing and so on, I'm not going to deal with. I want to focus also on some guidance as to acceptability, because this is another important factor for us as Caribbean people. Some account of the status and function, and then guidance as to the form and function of French Creole loanwords, and we heard Jeannette make reference to that a little while ago. And lexical explanations of a number of Hindu, Muslim, terms occurring increasingly in Caribbean culture from Guyana and Trinidad. To my mind, these are major, major issues because what they do is they actually speak to this social fabric, the historical, community, religious characteristics of the region. And I feel that they are central to, again, to understanding Caribbean self. And finally, a rationalization or a guide for the authentication of spellings that have remained conjectural or experimental so far. Now, again, for me, this is an area that requires close attention, because those highlighted provide potential answers to the needs of Caribbean societies, knowledge of what we have, recognition of value of what we have, highlighting commonalities, indicating parallels deriving from a common worldview, respecting historical inputs, and codifying. Now, these should be fundamental to Caribbean education or to properly appointed Caribbean schooling, but they never really feature in that kind of powerful way, which I think could very well be facilitated by the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage. Very quickly to bring it to some kind of conclusion, the how. Formal schooling could now rely on this resource to reset its assumptions and to find ways to take advantage of the knowledge and understandings brought through common historical experiences. I see the need for the formal school system to cast its net wider, to explore the oral traditions, the music, the stories, the indigenous medical practices, and a range of other features, entertainment included, which characterize Caribbean-ness. And if schooling is to maximize the potential of the region, then it must, to my mind, find ways of incorporating these things. And the dictionary, because of its breadth, its depth, and its thoroughness, in spite of the limitations, the natural limitations of all dictionaries, that they can never be completed or complete works. In spite of those things, the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage, to my mind, has the specific advantage, presents us with the specific advantage of being able to address the concerns that could change schooling in the formal sense into education in the best sense to maximize the benefits to the individual, to the nation, and to the region. And I want to end with a little narrative of personal experience. Some 25, 30 years ago, longer than that actually, when I was working in the School of Education, one of my trainee teachers came to me to say that he was applying for a post as principal of one of the better secondary schools, all male secondary schools in Trinidad and Tobago. And he told me he was going to an interview and asked me what I would recommend he should take as an orientation. I suggested to him that he should approach the interview pointing out that if he were appointed principal, he would use the environment for botany, biology, business enterprise, language, agriculture model farms, social studies. All these things existed in the general environment of the school, or in the approach, there was a beautiful riverbed, which ran for miles past the school. There was a golf course nearby. There was a French Creole speaking community. There were small farming groups. So I told him if I were going to the interview, I would tell him that's what I would focus on. He went, he did the interview. He said he tried to get them to understand that perspective, and they did not give him the job. But as the proverb says, cow no know the use of tail till cow fly season. That, I think, is what I want to say on the role of the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage in the delivery of Caribbean education. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Professor Robertson. I don't think your presentation needs an addendum at all. Was pretty clear on the use and impact, the use in education and the impact of the DCEU on education. So our next presenter is not only a past president of the Society for Caribbean Linguistics, but also an alumna of the University of the West Indies, where she did her PhD, and she's also a Calypso aficionado. Dr. Lise Weiner is Professor Emerita of Language Education at McGill University in Canada. She has done decades of work on the English and English-related Creoles of Trinidad and Tobago, which produced the collection Badjans, Baji, and Banknote Blue, Essays on the Social History of Language in Trinidad and Tobago. And it's a fascinating book. If you don't have a copy, please get your hands on a copy. It's not only academically sound, but at the same time, very, very entertaining. So that riveting collection was only eclipsed by her stellar contribution to Caribbean lexicography in the Dictionary of the English/Creole of Trinidad and Tobago, a dictionary on historical principles published in 2009. And I was just having a conversation with somebody on Facebook who was saying they didn't know, that much work went into the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage, that it took so much work. And I said to her, where dictionaries are concerned, find a level of difficulty, the highest you could think of, and then multiply it by 20. I think the Oxford English Dictionary people could tell you the time that was estimated for it was overrun by decades. And the same thing happened with Prof. Allsopp. The work kept on going on, and people were getting impatient. Some thought he was sitting twiddling his thumbs, but when some Caribbean words are pretty slippery, and every time you try to grab onto them, they escape you, especially if you are searching for etymologies. And Prof. Weiner can tell us about that. For that work, that's her Dictionary of the English/Creole of Trinidad and Tobago. She was the recipient in 2017 of the prestigious Frederick G. Cassidy Award for Distinguished Achievement in Lexicography and Lexicology. She, more than anyone alive today, could give us lessons about how hard it is to do lexicographic work on one Caribbean territory without constantly having to check what is going on in other territories. And that is why we'll be hearing from her today on Caribbean lexicography as territorial and regional. Prof. Weiner, you're okay now.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not seeing me. I'm just seeing your name.
No, we're seeing you.
Oh, you're seeing me. Okay. Thank you very much for including me in this very interesting and significant milestone appreciation. I'm not going to talk about my dictionary very much, but I would like to pick up some of the points that Jeannette and Ian referred to in terms of where the DCEU came from and how it got there. I'd like to take a step back and look at the historical context in which this dictionary evolved. So we have to go back to not the beginning of the Caribbean, but the beginning of the colonization of the Caribbean. Now we know that the great age of European imperialist exploration, which flourished in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, is often referred to as the Columbian Exchange. The material benefits for the Old World were very evident, but the purported benefits for the New World are much more difficult to identify. As conquerors and settlers began to colonize the New World, one of the things that spread was language, though of course there were already human tongues in place, many of which subsequently became circumscribed or replaced. Studies of these exotic developments included both native languages of the area and the particular varieties of European languages that developed in the New World: Spanish, French, English, Portuguese. Glossaries of Creolisms of the Caribbean are found in works ranging from travelogues, novels, and cookbooks to scientific studies. Caribbean lexicography began with these individual word lists and dictionaries, compiled initially by Europeans. These were, of course, heavily filtered through the languages, religions, and cultures of the compilers. Not surprisingly, the African components and contributions to these emergent languages were often ignored, misunderstood, or downplayed. All these word lists were very limited and unreliable, but by the end of the 19th century were becoming almost common as interesting kinds of chimeras, a single organism made up of cells from two or more individuals with two sets of DNA. Negative mythological attitudes towards such an organism, that is, an unreal, unnatural, or incongruous monster, was applied to Creole languages as not being considered whole or normal. Even today, with so many more resources available, new glossaries can be commonly found on the internet, and although they usually focus on one territory, they often mix together several, including words from the related standard simply unknown to the compilers. Is this a violation of the rights associated with territory? These early lists were limited not just by language, but by territory. I use territory deliberately as languages cross boundaries and individual places were not always independent countries. I also use it to evoke the French term terroir, that is, the environmental factors that affect a particular crop and its association of development with a particular place. But place in the Caribbean is not a series of discrete geographical points. Various reference works, as well as individual judgments, include different reference for the word Caribbean. Both the Bahamas and Trinidad and Tobago are frequently left off Caribbean maps on geological grounds. And what about mainland countries such as Belize, Honduras, and Suriname? Sometimes they are included, sometimes not. As Lawrence Carrington has pointed out, the Caribbean is less a specific set of places than a context of operation, within which many similar processes and inputs, DNA if you like, unwind slightly differently. He has thus suggested that it is more accurate to think of the Creole dialect standard configuration using metaphors such as a marble cake, bush growing through a chain link fence, or masses of interpenetrating bubbles. Some things are separate, some are not. Given the changing constellations of colonialism and the many factors influencing loanwords, borrowing, diffusion, etc., the choice of a particular territory reflected an early stage of political development and focused on depth rather than breadth. This continued in the post-colonial period as well. By the 1960s, individual scholarly dictionaries had begun to appear for Jamaica, the Bahamas, Trinidad and Tobago, and others more recently. Words do not recognize politically determined boundaries, but they can also represent intensely local phenomenon. To take a Trinidad and Tobago example, although British English was most dominant early on, once English replaced French Creole, World War II encouraged substantial adoption of US vocabulary and subsequent waves of American, African American, and now Jamaican influence. Rasta was new as a widespread term in Trinidad and Tobago in the 1970s, but in 2021, Batty Riders is listed in the Oxford English Dictionary. Richard Allsopp's revelatory and revolutionary approach started in the 1940s with his articles on the language we speak in Kike Overall. Battling colonialism, racism, prejudice, and ignorance, he sought recognition for his own and similar languages, recognition for small places as well as large places, recognition of the right for Caribbean Creoles to be spoken, written, and studied. The DCEU is the first and thus far only lexicographic project which treats the Caribbean as a region, a mindful collection of countries which share enough to distinguish them as a group, though they may or may not share specific vocabulary items. A massive undertaking, the work to realize Richard Allsopp's vision must continue, as we now have an epistemological framework for this work and can build on it. Forward ever. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Prof. Weiner. I was just warming up, and as soon as as soon as the calypso start to get sweet, you're done. But thanks for reminding us of the historical context that gave birth to the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage. And as I said, well, I didn't mention this before, but even from as early as the Dictionary of Jamaican English, which in a sense was the forerunner for dictionary types like the DCEU, the Dictionary of the English and Creole of Trinidad and Tobago. From there in the 1960s, you could see them grappling with the matter of how to decide on what a Jamaicanism is if the word is also shared by other Caribbean territories, because you don't want to state it's a Jamaicanism and then Trinbagonian say, but we use the word too, it's our word. And so even then, there was this difficulty. And so they did mark in the Dictionary of Jamaican English where words were shared with other Caribbean territories. And I think that, that formed the basis for Allsopp's own work. And I remember that Allsopp, just after the Dictionary of Jamaican English was published, did one of the most detailed critique of the dictionary to date. And I could see in that critique the bedrock for the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage. So thanks to all our presenters. This is time for the audience to ask questions. Prof. Robertson, there's a question for you from Pat McPherson. She said, it was an excellent presentation, but she's asking what of the indigenous languages of the first peoples of the Caribbean, where are they placed in the dictionary?
Well, I think insofar as he was able to get access in the case of Guyana and possibly Suriname, I'm not sure how much of Suriname was involved, but insofar as he was able to gain access, some of those terms are included and they have had to be, because many of those terms, especially for the coastal groups, have actually come into broader use in the case of Guyana, certainly, and possibly across the Caribbean as well. The real difficulty with working with indigenous groups during his time, and even to some extent even today, the real difficulty is that these languages are generally not easily accessed by the dominant coastland group. And it is the issue of getting to those places in many instances, or even where they're on the coast, getting into the communities themselves would have presented some challenges. But I think that in terms of education, it is important for the education system in the region to also have the opportunity to expand the dictionary where necessary to facilitate even broader acknowledgement and recognition of the indigenous peoples. I think it is critical, actually. I didn't say it's important, it's just critical. It couldn't be done in the context that Allsopp was working with. But I do think that in time, that the time is now to get it done. I hope that answers Pat.
Okay, I think it does answer the question, at least from my perspective. I wanted to ask, and this is specifically for the lexicographers on the panel. So that would be Professor Allsopp and Professor Weiner. What is your, so we have the DCEU, which is now 25 years old. What does the future of Caribbean lexicography look like? Or what would be your wish list? What should, or what do you think scholars should be working on? Let me go with Dr. Allsopp first.
Yes, thank you, Joseph. I, of course, have a very ambitious wish list. And one of the things I would like to see, first of all, is an updated edition of the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage. Our problem with that is that we wanted to do a larger work. We actually have in our card collection a stamp saying DCEU larger work. But having published with Oxford, Oxford was so challenged by the nature of the content of the DCEU, the original DCEU, that they decided that they would not publish any further editions of the dictionary. The new register for Caribbean English usage that Richard did of the 700 entries that he wanted to add to the dictionary was a kind of concession, a stopgap, if you will, because they were, perfectly resistant. And he did ask them if they would be interested in publishing a supplement. They were not biting at all. So one of my greatest wishes is to see a fully updated version of the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage. Coming out of that, as I said, is my multilingual work, and I would like to be able, I've done 2 dictionaries now. The one is going to be published soon, I hope, the second one. But I would like to see more of that done. And I would think that we need to produce small works like glossaries, word lists, concise dictionaries for schools, for the general public, for people who are interested in research, for tourists, for all kinds of groups. We need to be producing small works all the time. But so far, it is difficult to see how the future will go, because one of my concerns was who will carry on the work, and that's why I instituted the courses in Caribbean lexicography from undergrad to PhD here at K-Ville, because
Yes.
Richard was not interested in teaching of lexicography. He doesn't even know I did the courses because he was ill at the time and I didn't bother him with that. So that is one of our problems. We have a couple of PhD graduates, we have MA graduates, we have undergraduates who have done the courses as part of their degree. But the problem is who undertakes the larger works. That's why I'm suggesting smaller works to come out of this. And if we could just get a few research assistants into the center, we could channel them into what they could produce to help to carry on the work until such time as someone comes along with the great interest, the passion that Richard and I put into our work.
Great,
So,
excellent, excellent. Prof. Weiner?
Yes, I agree 110% with what Jeannette has just said. I think the problems of scope and accessibility and continuity are absolutely crucial. My one-word answer to what I'm concentrating on now is digitization. This is not an easy task. And anybody who tells you that you just plug it in and play it is living on some other planet. I have been working with the computer department at UWI St. Augustine to do this. And instead of paying students, we gave them course credits. But it has stalled during COVID. But nonetheless, I am hopeful that I can overcome the problems with the original press and with all kinds of things. And maybe I can find somebody to carry on this job. But I think digitization, especially for people of the millennial generation and afterwards, is crucial because they don't read book. They just look on their smartphones. So we are trying to adapt to this. And of course, one advantage is there's no limit to the internet. You know, there's no limit to that cloud. So we can put in all the stuff we want and it doesn't cost more printing pages. So that's what I would say my focus is on now.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from...
So could I
sorry.
just a quick comment. I just went into my dictionary and found a piece of correspondence, Jeannette, which I should probably share with you and Jeff Siegel, from Stanley Graves, which he sent to me many moons ago. He said he copied it to Richard Allsopp. I don't know what has happened to it, but it's part of some of the issues that he had with the dictionary when it came out in 25 years ago. So if you want, I can share it with you.
yes,
Certainly, sure.
Yeah.
But Prof, this means that you are not checking the dictionary every day.
I would say my life has other dimensions to it right now.
Okay. All right. There's a question for you, Prof. Robertson. It's from Elisa Mostin. And she says, I agree that schooling has to maximize the nation and region's potential. Why is it taking so long to change our language education? Give us your 2-minute version, Prof.
No, it's shorter than that. If I had the answer, I wouldn't even have retired. I'd have been happy to continue. The reality is that academics don't seem to have that much control over political process and policy. And although we might train people, when they go back to the system, they do the things to satisfy us as academics and go back into the system and just fit in.
And then I am going to pose this question to Jeannette because of your background in modern foreign languages. It's from Dr. Kumar Mabir, and he says, what do you think would be the impact on language of the massive migration of Venezuelans to neighboring English official countries of the Caribbean?
Yeah, good question. I think that it will make a huge difference. I feel that for too long, and I've been involved in this struggle of pushing foreign languages in the school system here in Barbados for years, and I've given up now because politicians don't necessarily see the same kinds of outcomes as educators do. But I think that that will have a huge impact. It will bring a lot of loan items, for more loan items into the languages. It will probably cause people to become more aware of the fact that they have among them people who speak other languages. And I'm hoping, because one of the things I've always recommended, at least here, that Spanish, which is the majority language of the Caribbean, it has the most speakers. It has over 50 million speakers compared with about 6 million English speakers and 20 million French and French Creole speakers. I would hope that that would help Spanish to become a second language, which it should be across the territories. It definitely should be a second language. But as I said, people say nice things in their manifestos. When election time comes around about foreign language competencies, I've seen it in about 5 different governments since I've been here, in the almost 40 years I've been here. And nobody, no government has done anything to really push it. I remember that I was particularly interested in getting Spanish to be offered at primary, because of course it is easier to teach a young child, and that is really when you should be teaching them, because their brains are, you know, developing, they're absorbing everything like a sponge. And I was trying to get the teaching of Spanish at primary. It happened when Mia Motley, our Prime Minister, was Minister of Education, but it wasn't properly done. It has sort of fallen by the wayside. They took in a whole number of people who are native speakers but are not trained and all that kind of thing. So I am hoping, I'm still hoping, although I more or less exited the battle, I'm still hoping that this influx will help people to see that they need to have a second language. And these are our neighbors, these are part of our region. They're Rimland territory. Venezuela is a rim, what Richard would have called a Rimland territory. But it is part of our region. So there we have it.
All right, thank you for that.
Could I intervene again very quickly to point out, Joseph, that in the case of Guyana, Brazilian Portuguese and Spanish are part of the normal remit of many of those groups in the hinterland. And they are now being more closely integrated into the coast, so that even in places like Tyrkkö and Georgetown now, there's a reasonably significant group of Brazilian Portuguese-speaking people. So there you have it. I mean, it's going to force us.
Yes.
And thanks, Prof. The final question I am going to answer myself is from Katina Lynch, who is asking, how can schools help students to embrace their Creole? And I'm going to answer by saying, by rephrasing the question, how can we, either as academics, speakers of Caribbean Creoles, activists, help schools to embrace Creoles? Because in most cases, it's a problem that the schools do not embrace the mother language of the child, and the school is responsible for some of the psychological damage that is caused. And so it's really not for us to help to convince the child. It's really to work with ministries, work with governments to not disenfranchise children. So I think this was time well spent to mark this event in Caribbean history. However, like a good soca song, although we may sing it over and over again as we play mass, we don't want the song itself to go on forever. So please allow me to thank all those who made this event possible so that you will have more time to go and buy and or consult the work that we are celebrating today. I have more copies of the dictionary to give away, and this time to 2 postgraduate students. If we have any postgraduate students here anywhere in the world and you are working on the Caribbean lexicon, just type your name in the chat with postgraduate student behind it. So just type postgraduate student in the chat. So if you are a student, a postgraduate student working on any aspect of the Caribbean lexicon, then just type postgraduate student and I will contact you about getting a copy of the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage. Just to remind you that this event was sponsored by the University of the West Indies Press that has republished the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage, and you can get copies from the press's website, also at UWI Bookshop on each campus of UWI, and also at many local bookstores in various Caribbean territories. To the organizations that made this event possible, the Helsinki Society for Historical Lexicography, the Richard and Jeannette Allsopp Center for Caribbean Lexicography, and the Jamaican Language Unit, thanks are in order. To Ms. Danique Irons, who provided technical support for this event, thank you. Danique Irons is a student registered at the Caribbean School for Media and Communication, CARIMAC, at the Mona campus of UWI. A very special thanks to Dr. Jeannette Allsopp, Professor Ian Robertson, and Professor Emerita Lise Weiner for their reflections and stimulating engagement on the history, nature, and impact of the dictionary. And thanks to Bajan poet, writer, and entrepreneur Cyndi Celeste, whose wordical contribution to today's event reminded us what motivated the compilation of the Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage and why the work is still relevant today within and without the Caribbean. And of course, a big thank you to all those who came out to celebrate this milestone with us. I believe at one point we went up to about 145 people watching on YouTube, people from Scotland, from Sweden, from Finland, from Suriname, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Jamaica, other territories in the Caribbean, from the US, from Canada, etc. So from all over. We look forward to seeing you at the Society for Caribbean Linguistics Conference in 2022, which will be hosted by the St. Augustine campus of the University of the West Indies in Trinidad and Tobago, or at the HELEX 7 conference, which will be held in 2023 in Jamaica. As we bid you farewell, we would like to leave you with the Calypso song that paved the way for Lise Weiner's magnum opus, the Dictionary of the English/Creole of Trinidad and Tobago. Take care, walk good, and enjoy the mighty conquerors, the Trinidad Dictionary.
Trinidadian slang is amusing, but most foreigners may find it confusing. So as I see it is necessary, Trinidad should have its own dictionary. We all consent English very hard to learn, so we invent a language of our own. But if you just land here, you in a monkey pants, to understand you won't stand a chance. Like if we say, she tried to mama guy he this jagabat, well not a foreigner at all. Can't interpret that. That means she tried to make he a kunu munu, meaning she want a man she and she sweet man too. So So he beat the Wabin till she bazodi. As you should see, you can't disagree with me, papi. Webster should have come to Trinidad to complete the dictionary. You mustn't doubt me. Take for instance, one day they hear a native say, Tabanka have me neighbor looking so total be. A foreigner go bound to jump off his seat and say Tabanka is a sweet piece of meat to eat. And if you try to convince him, he may tell you you lie. Tabanka can't bring out tears to a big man, I. No, may shout Mr. Sneeze and go and tell your wife Tabanka for breakfast, please. Here we again. This big belly woman so kung say, the me raz me child getting cocoa bay. When you try to bamboozle your partner Fred, you're giving him a 619 instead. So they really should give the first prize to we for our splendid speaking ability. You see, Webster should have come to Trinidad to complete the dictionary. Key. Well, no one could state how these words originate, but who invent them? They're really great, and after the time go rich, the government will teach the school children to use them in speech. And you may hear the dog saying, Suki to move along, or solo boy you feel is a wajang, but I bet in anybody took a tea. None of them ain't go search no dictionary. Here we again, you have cocoa in the sun, well look out for rain. That is a local quotation we pack with brain. And if you have cocoa bay, try and do get yours. As you should see, the island ram with stars. Now they just say Shakespeare great in philosophy, but they lucky, he never tangled with we. You see, Webster should have come to Trinidad to complete the dictionary. Key. So then when a tourist visit the island, he wouldn't have to get himself in confusion because he know the same kind of slangs like we, using words like papi, show and bazodi. But how you mean? And if by chance you get him in difficulty, he may say wait and take out the dictionary. I bet you're bound to get in an awful rage. If when you're talking to he can't find the page. Another thing, every week we'll have to change this dictionary to try and keep up with the slangs in La Trinity. And when the year ends, print and the fresh file again. As you should see, we really will be holding strain, but it would help tourism, this you must agree. A word like Boboli, of course, could be found on the B. You see, Webster should have come to Trinidad to complete the dictionary.